I'm Audrey Mitchell, 29, a marketing manager at one of Boston's top firms. Last Sunday, I sat at my parents' mahogany dining table hoping this family dinner would be different. I'd finally earned the promotion I'd worked toward for years and was eager to share my news. But when my mother Margaret glanced between me and her sister Diana, she sneered, "Honestly, Audrey, you're only fit to be my sister's slave." The room froze. In that moment, I did something unthinkable, something I'd never dared do in 29 years of desperate approval seeking. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to family who couldn't see your worth. Growing up in Newton, Massachusetts, an affluent Boston suburb, our family appeared picture-perfect from the outside. My father, Robert, a successful corporate attorney, provided us with a beautiful 5-bedroom colonial home, private school education, and all the material comforts a child could want. My mother, Margaret, a former debutante from a prestigious Boston family, devoted herself to maintaining our family's social standing. My younger brother, James, was the athletic golden boy who could do no wrong in my mother's eyes. Then there was me, artistic, thoughtful, and perpetually falling short of Margaret's expectations. From my earliest memories, my mother's criticism was a constant companion. When I brought home an A- on my third-grade math test, she sighed and said, "Diana's daughter Emily got straight A's again. Why can't you be more like her?" When I won second place in the regional spelling bee at 12. Her response was, "Well, first would have been better, wouldn't it?" The pattern was relentless and inescapable. My Aunt Diana, my mother's younger sister by 3 years, was the standard against which I was always measured and always found wanting. Diana had the perfect life my mother seemed to covet. She'd married Richard, a handsome and wealthy investment banker, had 2 perfect children, and ran a successful interior design business catering to Boston's elite. She lived in a stunning Beacon Hill townhouse featured in architectural magazines, drove a Mercedes convertible, and spent summers on Nantucket. What made the comparison more painful was that Diana herself was actually kind to me. She always remembered my birthdays with thoughtful gifts that matched my interests, asked about my aspirations, and seemed genuinely interested in my life. This created a complicated emotional tangle. I simultaneously admired Diana and resented being constantly compared to her. My mother's obsession with Diana manifested in peculiar ways. Every Christmas, Easter, and Thanksgiving, we would go to Diana's immaculately decorated home. While other guests relaxed and socialized, my mother would volunteer my services. "Audrey can help in the kitchen," she'd announce. "She's so good with the dishes," or "Audrey will watch all the children so the adults can talk." I became effectively unpaid staff at these gatherings, never a true participant. When I was 16, Diana hosted a charity fundraiser at her home. My mother volunteered me to help for the entire weekend. I spent hours arranging flowers, setting tables, and serving drinks while wearing an uncomfortable black dress my mother selected. When a guest complimented my flower arrangements, my mother quickly interjected, "She's just following Diana's instructions. Diana has the real eye for design in the family." Despite this constant undermining, I worked hard to build my own identity. I graduated with honors from Boston University with a degree in marketing. While my mother suggested I should use my connections to work for Diana's design firm, I instead secured an entry-level position at Mitchell Hayes, a respected marketing agency with no connection to our family. Over the next 7 years, I worked tirelessly, earning promotion after promotion through merit alone. Each advancement was met with my mother's trademark dismissal. "Well, marketing isn't exactly brain surgery, is it? Or I suppose someone has to make advertisements." My father would offer a quiet "good job, sweetheart" when my mother wasn't in earshot, but never defended me to her face. 2 weeks before that fateful Sunday dinner, I received the news I'd been working toward for years: a promotion to senior marketing manager, becoming one of the youngest team leaders in the company's history. My client portfolio included major national brands, and I would be managing a team of 8 people. The substantial salary increase meant I could finally afford to buy my own condo in Cambridge rather than continuing to rent. I debated whether to share this news at the family dinner. Past experience suggested my mother would find some way to diminish my achievement, but a small, persistent part of me still hoped for her approval. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this accomplishment would finally be enough. I spent extra time getting ready that Sunday, selecting a professional yet stylish blue dress and taking care with my makeup and hair. As I drove to my parents' home, I rehearsed how I would announce my promotion, imagining perhaps foolishly my mother's proud smile and congratulatory words. As I pulled into the circular driveway of my parents' Georgian-style home, I noticed Diana's Mercedes already parked there. Taking a deep breath, I checked my reflection one last time in the rearview mirror, practiced my smile, and walked toward the front door, hope and anxiety battling within me. The imposing double doors of my parents' home always made me feel small, like I was entering a formal institution rather than a family residence. The doorbell's deep chime echoed through the foyer, and moments later, our longtime housekeeper Liza welcomed me with a warm smile that felt more genuinely familial than most of my actual family interactions. "They're all in the sitting room, Miss Audrey," she said, taking my light spring coat. I could hear the murmur of conversation and the delicate clink of ice in crystal tumblers as I approached. My father stood by the marble fireplace discussing golf with Diana's husband Richard. My brother James lounged on the leather sofa, scrolling through his phone. My mother and Diana sat together on the damask love seat, heads bent close in conversation. "Audrey," finally my mother said, checking her watch though I was precisely on time, "we were just about to start without you." "Sorry, I'm right on time," I said with a smile, trying to keep my tone light. I kissed my father's cheek and received his customary pat on the shoulder. "Hey sis," James said without looking up from his phone. Diana rose to greet me with a hug. "Audrey, you look lovely. That blue is perfect with your coloring." "Thanks, Diana. How are Emily and Michael?" I asked about her children, both now in college. "Thriving. Emily just made Dean's List again at Yale, and Michael's startup got its second round of funding. We're so proud," Diana beamed. I noticed my mother's eyes narrow slightly at Diana's good news. The complex dynamics between the sisters had always fascinated and confused me. My mother seemed simultaneously resentful of Diana's success and desperate for her approval. "Dinner is served, Mrs. Mitchell," Eliza announced from the doorway. We processed into the formal dining room where the mahogany table gleamed under the crystal chandelier. The table was set with the heirloom china and silver that only emerged for company, another sign that Diana's presence elevated this from a regular family dinner to a special occasion. The first course, butternut squash soup with cream fraiche, was served in tense silence. I searched for a neutral topic to break the ice. "The garden looks beautiful, Mom. The tulips are really spectacular this year." "Thank you," my mother replied. Diana recommended a new gardener. "He's worked wonders with the difficult soil in that north corner." And there it was, even my compliment about the garden somehow circled back to Diana. "So, Audrey," my father said, "how are things at the agency? Still busy with that sports drink campaign?" This was my opening. I sat up straighter, a smile spreading across my face. "Actually, I have some exciting news. I've been promoted to senior marketing manager. I'll be leading the team on all our major accounts." "Oh, before I forget," Diana interrupted, not realizing I was mid-announcement. "I have some news too. I'm opening a second location of the design firm in Providence. The Rhode Island market has been begging for our aesthetic, and we've already pre-booked 6 months of projects." My news evaporated like morning mist. My mother's face lit up in a way it never did for me. "Diana, that's wonderful news. An expansion, how exciting. Robert, did you hear that? Diana's business is growing again." My father nodded appreciatively. "That's excellent, Diana. Smart business move." "Thanks, Margaret. It's been a lot of work, but the timing feels right," Diana said. "We've hired 3 new designers and I'm sure you'll find the perfect people." My mother gushed. "You've always had such an eye for talent." I sat there, my own news still hanging unfinished in the air. Diana, noticing my expression, tried to circle back. "I'm so sorry, Audrey, you were saying something about your job?" "Yes," I said, trying to recapture my enthusiasm. "I've been promoted to senior marketing manager. It's a big step up, and I'll be leading a team of 8 people now." My mother's response was immediate and dismissive. "Oh, that's nice, dear. I suppose they had to fill the position with someone." She turned back to Diana. "Now tell me more about the new location. Will it be in that charming historic district?" The familiar sting of her dismissal burned, but I pressed on. "It's actually a really competitive position. I was selected from over 20 candidates, including several from outside the company." My mother murmured without looking at me. "Diana, will you be using local artisans for the Providence office like you do in Boston? Your commitment to supporting craftspeople is so admirable." "Mom," I said, my voice stronger than I intended, causing everyone to look at me in surprise. "Did you hear what I said? This promotion is a big deal. I've worked really hard for this." "Yes, Audrey, I heard you. You got a promotion at your little marketing job. That's nice." Her tone suggested it was anything but Diana is expanding a business she built from the ground up. It's hardly the same thing, is it? James surprisingly came to my defense. "Mom, Audrey's promotion is a big deal. She's been working toward this for years." Thank you, James, I said, genuinely surprised by his support. Well, my mother sniffed. I suppose in your industry it might be considered an achievement. Not everyone can create something original like Diana. The second course arrived, poached salmon with dill sauce, providing a momentary reprieve from the tension. Diana attempted to smooth things over. Audrey, tell us more about your new role. Will you be working with any exciting new clients? Before I could answer, my mother interjected. Diana, don't feel you need to humor her. I'm sure your business expansion is much more interesting than office politics at an advertising agency. Marketing agency, I corrected automatically. Whatever, my mother waved her hand dismissively. The point is, Diana's achievement is creating jobs and bringing culture to a new city. That's something to be proud of. The implication that my achievement wasn't something to be proud of hung heavily in the air. My promotion is something to be proud of too, I said quietly. I've worked very hard to get where I am. My mother put down her fork with a clatter. Audrey, please, no one is saying your promotion isn't nice for you, but let's maintain some perspective. Diana is an entrepreneur who built something from nothing. You just climbed one tiny rung on a corporate ladder someone else built. The room fell silent. Even my father looked uncomfortable now. Margaret, he said gently, Audrey's accomplishment is significant in her field. Robert, please, my mother said sharply, don't encourage delusions of grandeur. Audrey needs to understand her place. And what exactly is my place, mother? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. She looked at me with cold eyes I'd known my entire life. Honestly, Audrey, given your limited creative abilities and lack of entrepreneurial spirit, you're only fit to be my sister's slave. At least then you'd learn from someone with actual talent. The words hung in the air like poison. Diana gasped. James muttered, Jesus, Mom. My father closed his eyes briefly, his face pained. In that moment, something broke inside me, or perhaps something finally broke free. My mother's words, you're only fit to be my sister's slave, reverberated through the dining room. The crystal chandelier light suddenly seemed too harsh, the room too warm. I felt a curious buzzing in my ears and a sensation of floating outside my body, observing the scene from above. I placed my linen napkin beside my barely touched salmon with deliberate calm. I think I should leave now. Don't be so sensitive, Audrey, my mother said, her voice laced with irritation. I was simply making a point about career trajectories. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. No, you weren't. You were doing what you've always done, diminishing me to elevate Diana. Audrey, please sit down, my father said, his voice gentle but ineffectual as always. Your mother didn't mean it the way it sounded. Yes, she did, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. She's meant every cruel word she's ever said to me. My mother's face tightened with anger. This is exactly your problem, Audrey. You're so dramatic. We can't have a simple family dinner without you making a scene. I laughed, then a genuine laugh of revelation. That's incredible. You insult me in the most degrading way possible, and I'm the one making a scene by quietly leaving. I turned and walked toward the foyer. Behind me, chairs scraped as people rose from the table. My mother's heels clicked rapidly on the hardwood as she followed me. Audrey Elizabeth Mitchell, you get back to that table right now. We are having a family dinner. I reached for my coat on the hallway rack. No, mother, not anymore. She grabbed my arm with surprising strength. You've always been like this, oversensitive, making everything about you. Diana announces wonderful news and you can't stand that the attention isn't on your minor workplace promotion. The familiar script began to play in my head. Apologize, smooth things over, endure the rest of the evening in silent misery, then cry all the way home. It was what I'd always done, from my earliest memories. When I was 8 and my mother mocked my science fair project in front of relatives. When I was 13 and she called my first oil painting amateurish garbage. When I was 17 and she told me not to bother applying to Cornell because they have standards, dear. But something had changed. At 29, standing in my parents' foyer with my mother's manicured fingers digging into my arm, I suddenly saw with perfect clarity the pattern that had defined my life. Let go of my arm, I said quietly. Not until you. Let go of my arm. Each word was precise, controlled. Something in my tone made her release me. She stepped back, blinking in surprise. I have something to say, I continued, and for once, you're going to listen without interrupting. My father appeared in the hallway, followed by Diana and James. They stood silently, witnesses to something unprecedented. For 29 years, I began. I have tried to earn your approval. I have twisted myself into shapes that weren't mine, suppressed my feelings, tolerated your cruelty, and made excuses for your behavior. And I'm done. Audrey, my mother started. I'm not finished, I said, my voice still eerily calm. You have never seen me, Mother, not the real me. You've only ever seen a disappointing reflection of the daughter you wished you had, Diana's daughter. Every accomplishment of mine has been dismissed, every failure magnified. You've made me feel worthless my entire life." My mother's face flushed with anger. "That is completely untrue. I've given you everything." "Material things," I interjected. "Yes, I never lacked for clothes or toys or lessons, but I lacked the one thing every child needs, a mother who delighted in me just as I am." I turned slightly to include Diana in my gaze. "You've spent my entire life trying to turn me into Diana's mini-me or her personal assistant. At every family gathering, I was volunteered to serve, to help, to clean up, never allowed to simply be a family member enjoying the occasion." Diana stepped forward, distress evident on her face. "Audrey, I never realized." "I know you didn't," I said, softening my tone slightly. "This isn't about you, Diana. You've always been kind to me. This is about my mother's obsession with you, with measuring me against you and finding me eternally wanting." I turned back to my mother, whose face had gone from flushed to pale. "I've spent years in therapy trying to undo the damage you've done to my self-worth. Do you know what my therapist calls your behavior? Emotional abuse." "How dare you?" my mother gasped. "After everything I've sacrificed." "What exactly have you sacrificed, Mother? Your dreams, your identity? Is that why you resent me so much, because I'm pursuing my own path instead of living through someone else like you've done with Diana?" The foyer fell completely silent. My father looked stricken. "I'm cutting ties with you," I said, my voice finally breaking slightly. "I can't do this anymore. It's destroying me." "You can't be serious," my mother whispered. "I've never been more serious about anything in my life," I replied. "I deserve better than this. I deserve to be around people who value me." I turned to my father. "Dad, I love you, but your silence has enabled her behavior my entire life. You've never once stood up for me." His eyes filled with tears. "Audrey, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize how bad it was." "Yes, you did," I said gently. "You just found it easier to look away." I glanced at James, who looked stunned but nodded slightly in acknowledgement. Then, to everyone's surprise, Diana stepped forward. "Margaret, Audrey is right. The way you talk to her. I've never said anything because I didn't want to cause problems between us, but it's cruel. It's always been cruel." My mother gaped at her sister in shock. "You're taking her side?" "This isn't about sides," Diana said firmly. "This is about recognizing unhealthy behavior. You've been using me as a weapon against your daughter for years, and I've let it happen. I'm as guilty as anyone." She turned to me. "Audrey, I am so sorry. I should have said something long ago." That unexpected support from the last person I expected it from, the perfect Diana, unleashed the tears I'd been holding back. But I didn't collapse. Instead, I stood taller. "Thank you," I said to Diana. Then I looked one last time at my mother. "Goodbye, Mother. I hope someday you understand what you've lost today." I walked out the door into the cool evening air, shaking with fear but feeling more liberated than I ever had in my life. Behind me, I could hear my mother's indignant protests, my father's murmured responses, Diana's surprisingly firm voice. But for the first time, I wasn't listening anymore. I was walking away, terrified but free. The 20-minute drive from my parents' Newton home to my Cambridge apartment passed in a blur. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as adrenaline coursed through my system. By the time I pulled into my parking space, tears were streaming down my face, not from sadness but from pure emotional overload. Inside my apartment, I collapsed onto my sofa, my body racked with sobs that felt like they were coming from some primal, long-suppressed place within me. Years of swallowed pain erupted all at once. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes swollen. When the storm finally subsided, I felt hollow yet somehow lighter, as if I'd purged a long festering infection. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea with shaking hands and sat by my window watching the lights of Boston twinkling across the Charles River. My phone, which I'd silenced before entering my parents' house, a self-protective habit I'd developed years ago, now lit up with a barrage of notifications. 12 missed calls from my mother, 5 from my father, 3 from James, 1 from Diana, and dozens of text messages. I scrolled through them quickly. My mother's texts escalated from demanding I return immediately to threatening to cut me off financially, an empty threat, as I'd been financially independent since college, to accusing me of humiliating her in front of Diana. My fathers were pleading, "Please call us, sweetheart, and let's talk about this, and your mother is very upset." James' single text surprised me. "That was long overdue. Call if you need anything." I hesitated over Diana's message. "Audrey, I'd like to talk when you're ready. No pressure, just know I'm here." After careful consideration, I blocked my mother's number, something I should have done years ago. I sent brief responses to my father and James, explaining that I needed space and would contact them when I was ready. To Diana, I wrote, "Thank you for your support tonight. It meant more than you know. I need some time, but I'd like to talk later." Sleep eluded me that night. I kept replaying the dinner in my mind, alternating between fierce pride and finally standing up for myself in waves of guilt and fear. What had I done? Had I overreacted? Would I regret burning this bridge? By morning, exhaustion had settled into my bones, but I dragged myself to work anyway. I needed the comfort of routine, the distraction of professional responsibilities. My new team greeted me with enthusiasm, unaware of the personal earthquake I'd experienced just hours before. Throughout the week, I moved through my days in a strange state of emotional numbness, punctuated by moments of panic and others of unexpected peace. My father continued to text daily, his messages growing increasingly concerned. James checked in occasionally with characteristic brevity. My mother, unable to reach me directly, began emailing lengthy screeds justifying her behavior and demanding apologies for my outbursts. On Thursday evening, Diana called. I let it go to voicemail, not quite ready for that conversation. Her message was gentle. "Audrey, I'm in Cambridge tomorrow for a client meeting. If you feel up to it, perhaps we could meet for coffee. No pressure at all. I completely understand if you need more time." After considerable thought, I texted back agreeing to meet her at a quiet cafe near Harvard Square the following afternoon. I arrived early, selecting a secluded table in the corner where our conversation wouldn't be overheard. Diana entered precisely on time, looking elegant as always in a tailored blazer and silk scarf, but with an uncharacteristic hesitancy in her step. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, settling across from me after a brief awkward hug. "Thank you for standing up for me on Sunday," I replied. "I never expected that." Diana's perfectly composed face crumpled slightly. "I should have done it years ago, Audrey. I've been a coward." The server arrived to take our orders: an herbal tea for me, an espresso for Diana. When we were alone again, Diana leaned forward. "I need to tell you something that may help explain, though not excuse, your mother's behavior toward you." She took a deep breath. "The perfect life you think I have, it's not real, Audrey. Richard and I have been in marriage counseling for years. He had an affair a decade ago that nearly ended our marriage. Emily struggled with an eating disorder through high school that we kept hidden from the family. Michael dropped out of college twice before finding his path." I stared at her, stunned. "But everything always seems so perfect with you." "That's the illusion Margaret needs to maintain," Diana said softly. "She's built this narrative about my perfect life, and I've helped her sustain it because it seemed easier than challenging." "But why?" I asked. "Why is she so invested in this idea of your perfection?" Diana's elegant hands trembled slightly as she stirred her espresso. "Your mother has always been deeply insecure, Audrey. She was the pretty one, the social one. Growing up, I was the quiet, studious sister who didn't fit the mold our parents wanted. But then I married Richard, whose family had more social standing than Robert's, and suddenly Margaret felt displaced." "That doesn't explain why she's treated me so terribly," I said, a familiar hurt rising in my chest. "No, it doesn't," Diana agreed. "But I think she sees in you the same independence she gave up. She wanted to be an architect. Did you know that? But our parents discouraged her, saying it wasn't appropriate for a woman of her background. She chose the socially acceptable path, marrying well, maintaining the perfect home, joining the right committees. And I didn't," I murmured, understanding dawning. "You pursued your passion despite her discouragement. Every time you succeed, it reminds her of what she surrendered." Diana reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "It's not your fault, Audrey, and it doesn't excuse how she's treated you, but understanding it might help you find peace." "Have you been envious of me too?" I asked, voicing a question I'd never dared ask before. Diana's smile was sad but genuine. "Yes, but not in the way you might think. I've envied your courage to live authentically, to choose a path based on what you want rather than what's expected. That's rare in our family." We talked for nearly 3 hours, peeling back layers of family history and dynamics I'd never fully understood. For the first time, I saw Diana not as the perfect Anne I could never measure up to, but as a complex woman who had made her own compromises and carried her own regrets. As we prepared to leave, Diana hugged me tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Audrey. What you did Sunday took incredible courage." "I'm still not sure if it was the right thing," I admitted. "Setting boundaries is always the right thing," she said firmly, "even when it hurts." I walked back to my apartment with my mind reeling from new perspectives. The family narrative I'd accepted my entire life was crumbling, revealing a more complicated truth beneath. I wasn't sure what would come next, but for the first time I felt like I was seeing clearly. The week following my conversation with Diana brought an unexpected calm. At work, I threw myself into my new responsibilities, finding confidence in leading my team that I'd never quite felt before. In my personal life, I began making small but significant changes, rearranging my apartment to better reflect my tastes rather than what my mother would approve of, reconnecting with friends I'd neglected, and most importantly, scheduling additional sessions with Dr. Lowenstein, my therapist. What you experienced at that dinner was a significant trauma response, Dr. Lowenstein explained during our Tuesday session. You've been carrying the accumulated weight of emotional abuse for decades, and it finally reached a breaking point. I still feel guilty sometimes, I admitted, fidgeting with the fringe of the office's throw pillow, like I should have found a less dramatic way to set boundaries. Audrey, she said gently, you've spent years trying to establish healthy boundaries in subtle, non-confrontational ways. How effective was that approach? I sighed, not effective at all. Exactly, sometimes a clean break is necessary for healing to begin. Over the next few sessions, we explored childhood memories I'd long suppressed, moments of humiliation, of desperate attempts to win my mother's approval, of confusion when nothing I did was ever enough. We identified patterns of behavior I'd developed in response: people-pleasing, perfectionism, the tendency to apologize for things that weren't my fault, the habit of making myself smaller to avoid drawing attention. Your mother's treatment affected every aspect of your development, Dr. Lowenstein observed. But the good news is, once you recognize these patterns, you can begin to change them. On Saturday morning, I was sorting through old photographs, part of my therapy homework to reconnect with my authentic self, when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Peering through the peephole, I was shocked to see my father standing in the hallway, looking uncomfortable in casual clothes I rarely saw him wear. I opened the door, unsure what to expect. Dad, what are you doing here? I called James for your address, he explained, his tall frame seeming somehow diminished. I hope it's all right that I came without calling first. I was afraid you might say no. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. Would you like some coffee? Please, he said, looking around my apartment with interest. This is nice, Audrey, very you. In the kitchen, I busied myself with the coffee maker while my father settled at my small dining table. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken words. Your mother doesn't know I'm here, he finally said as I placed a mug in front of him. I figured, I replied, taking the seat across from him. How is she? Angry, hurt, confused. He sighed deeply. She genuinely doesn't understand why you reacted the way you did. Are you here to convince me to apologize to her? I asked, tension creeping back into my shoulders. No, he said, surprising me. I'm here to apologize to you. I blinked, certain I'd misheard him. In my entire life, I couldn't recall my father ever apologizing for anything. I've failed you, Audrey, he continued, his voice cracking slightly. I've watched Margaret tear you down year after year, and I did nothing. I told myself it wasn't that bad, that all mothers and daughters have difficult relationships, that Margaret just had high standards because she wanted the best for you. He stared into his coffee, unable to meet my eyes. But that's not true. What she did, what she's always done, was cruel, and my silence made me complicit. Why, I asked, the question I'd wanted to ask him my entire life. Why didn't you ever stand up for me? My father's shoulders slumped. Fear mostly. Fear of conflict. Fear of losing her. You have to understand, Margaret wasn't always like this. When we first met, she was vibrant, ambitious, but something changed after we married, and more dramatically after you were born. Diana told me mother wanted to be an architect, I said. He looked up, surprised. She told you that? Yes, Margaret was brilliant at spatial design, but her parents insisted it wasn't a suitable career for a woman of her background. By the time we met, she'd already suppressed that dream. That doesn't excuse how she treated me, I said firmly. No, it doesn't, he agreed. Nothing excuses it, but it might help explain it. Margaret has carried a deep resentment for the paths not taken. When you showed artistic talent as a child, instead of nurturing it, she saw it as a reminder of what she'd given up. And when I chose marketing over law like you wanted, you both saw it as a rebellion, I concluded. I was disappointed initially, he admitted, but I've watched you build a career you love, and I can see now that you made the right choice. I'm proud of you, Audrey. The words I'd longed to hear my entire life landed with surprising hollowness. Thank you, I said mechanically. There's something else you should know, my father continued. Margaret's own mother was extremely critical of her. Nothing Margaret did was ever good enough for Victoria. The way Margaret treats you, it's the only model of mothering she knows. The cycle of abuse, I murmured, recalling Dr. Lowenstein's term. I suppose so, my father said, looking pained. I'm not telling you this to excuse her behavior or to pressure you into reconciling. I just thought, It might help you to understand. We talked for nearly 2 hours. My father shared stories about my mother's childhood that I'd never heard before, her own struggles with a hypercritical mother, the pressure to be the perfect debutante, the dreams she'd abandoned to fulfill her parents' expectations. For the first time, I glimpsed the wounded woman beneath my mother's perfectly controlled exterior. Understanding my mother's pain didn't erase the hurt she'd caused me, but it did help me see her as a flawed, damaged human rather than the all-powerful figure who had dominated my emotional landscape. This perspective shift was oddly freeing. "What happens now?" my father asked as he prepared to leave. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I need time. I can't go back to the way things were. I won't survive it. If Mother ever wants a relationship with me again, things will have to change dramatically." "She may not be capable of the change you need," he said softly. "I know," I replied, feeling the weight of that truth, "and I have to be prepared for that possibility." After he left, I sat by my window for a long time, watching the afternoon light change over the Cambridge rooftops. I felt a complex mixture of grief for the mother I'd never had and determination to protect the hard-won peace I was beginning to find. In the weeks that followed, I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected while trying to please my family. I called my college roommate Tasha, who had tried repeatedly to show me how toxic my relationship with my mother was. We met for dinner, and her warm, unconditional acceptance reminded me of what healthy relationships felt like. I reached out to my high school friend Zoe, who now lived in New York. "I always wondered when you'd finally break free," she said during our video chat. "I remember how you'd cancel plans whenever your mom disapproved, how you'd apologize for things that weren't your fault." "Was it that obvious?" I asked, embarrassed. "To everyone but you," she said gently. "We were just waiting for you to see it." With each conversation, each therapy session, each day of maintaining my boundaries, I felt myself growing stronger. The guilt and doubt still surfaced occasionally, but they no longer overwhelmed me. I was beginning to trust my own perceptions, my own worth, in a way I never had before. The unthinkable act of standing up to my mother had set me on a path I couldn't have imagined, a path toward genuine healing and self-discovery. The journey would be long and often painful, but for the first time in my life, I was walking it on my own terms. 6 months after the fateful family dinner, Boston's summer heat had given way to the crisp air and vibrant colors of autumn. The seasonal transformation mirrored the changes in my own life, which had evolved in ways both subtle and profound since that April evening when I finally stood up to my mother. The most visible change was my new apartment, a sunlit one-bedroom in South End with bay windows and a small balcony where I'd created a miniature garden. Moving had been both practical, I was closer to work, and symbolic. Every piece of furniture, every color choice, every decoration reflected my tastes alone, without the unconscious filter of "would Mother approve" that had previously influenced my decision. Professionally, I was thriving. My team had successfully launched campaigns for 2 major clients, earning industry recognition and bringing substantial new business to the agency. My management style, collaborative and supportive rather than authoritarian, had created a cohesive team environment that fostered creativity and commitment. "You're a natural leader, Audrey," my boss remarked during my 6-month review. "The team respects you, and clients trust your judgment." The promotion was clearly the right move. Hearing praise without immediately discounting it or waiting for the criticism to follow was still a new experience, but I was learning to accept recognition of my abilities. My relationship with Diana had evolved into something I never could have predicted. After our cafe conversation, we began meeting regularly, not as aunt and niece with all the family baggage that entailed, but as 2 women with shared experiences and genuine interest in each other's lives. "I've started painting again," Diana confided during one of our Sunday brunches at a small bistro that had become our regular spot. "Nothing professional, just for myself. It's something I loved in college but gave up when I started the design business." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased for her. "What kind of painting?" "Abstract expressionism," she said with a self-conscious laugh, "very different from the controlled aesthetic of my interior design work. It's freeing." Diana, too, was changing. She had begun establishing firmer boundaries with my mother, refusing to participate in comparisons or criticism of me. This stance had created tension between the sisters. "Margaret accused me of taking sides," Diana told me. "I told her this isn't about sides, it's about breaking unhealthy patterns." She didn't take it well. "I'm sorry," I said, feeling a twinge of guilt that my actions had complicated their relationship. "Don't be," Diana replied firmly. This confrontation was long overdue, for both of us. My father and I had settled into a tentative new dynamic. We spoke weekly by phone, conversations that were sometimes awkward but increasingly authentic. He never pressured me to reconcile with my mother but kept me updated on her state of mind. She's seeing a therapist, he told me during one call in September, the surprise evident in his voice. It was James who finally convinced her. My brother James had become an unexpected ally in the family restructuring. Though never demonstrative, he had supported my boundaries in his own way, refusing to act as a go-between for my mother and standing up to her when she criticized me in my absence. She's still not ready to acknowledge how her behavior affected you, my father continued, but the fact that she's willing to speak to someone professional, it's a start, Audrey. It is, I agreed, careful not to invest too much hope in this development. Dr. Lowenstein had warned me about the pattern of abusers making superficial changes to regain access to those who have established boundaries. My mother had made several attempts to re-establish direct contact, ranging from angry demands to tearful pleas delivered via my father or James. She'd even sent a large, expensive floral arrangement to my office with a card that read simply, "Family is forever." Mother, I donated the flowers to a nearby nursing home. In late October, I agreed to a carefully controlled meeting with her, lunch at a restaurant of my choosing, with clear time boundaries and the understanding that I would leave immediately if she became critical or manipulative. She arrived precisely on time, immaculately dressed as always, but with a certain fragility I'd never noticed before. Our greeting was stiff, formal, nothing like the effusive hug she performed for public consumption in the past. "You look well," she said as we were seated, her eyes taking in my new haircut and the professional outfit I'd selected with care. "Thank you," I replied. "How have you been?" The conversation that followed was unlike any we'd ever had, cautious, superficial, but free from her usual barbed comments and dismissals. She asked polite questions about my job and new apartment. I inquired about her charity committee work. We discussed the unusually warm fall weather and a new restaurant that had opened in their neighborhood. What we didn't discuss was the elephant in the room, the history of emotional abuse, my dramatic exit from the family dinner, the 6 months of limited contact. It wasn't the time for that conversation, and I wasn't sure if she would ever be capable of having it honestly. As we finished our meals, she hesitated, then said, "I would like to see more of you, Audrey." "I'd like that too," I said carefully, "but things would need to be different between us." A flash of the old defensiveness crossed her face, quickly suppressed. "Your father thinks I've been too critical of you." It wasn't an apology or even a direct acknowledgement of her behavior, but it was more self-reflection than I'd ever heard from her. "Yes," I said simply, "you have been." She nodded, her lips pressed together. "I'm trying to understand why." Again, not an apology, but perhaps a beginning. We parted with a tentative agreement to meet again in a few weeks. I walked away feeling neither triumphant nor defeated, just clear-eyed about the long road ahead if we were to build any kind of healthy relationship. The most profound changes, however, were internal. Through continued therapy and self-reflection, I was dismantling the false narratives that had shaped my self-perception for decades. I was learning to recognize my own worth independent of external validation, to trust my instincts, to express needs and wants without apology. In late November, my team's campaign for a sustainable clothing brand was nominated for a prestigious industry award. The recognition was significant enough that the agency decided to send our entire team to the awards ceremony in New York. "You should invite your family," my colleague Priya suggested as we discussed the event. "It's a big deal, Audrey." After some consideration, I invited my father and Diana. Both accepted immediately. My mother, when informed by my father, sent a brief message through him: "Congratulations on your nomination. I have a prior commitment that evening." The night of the ceremony, as I sat between my father and Diana in the elegant ballroom of a Manhattan hotel, I felt a surreal sense of having crossed into a new reality. My father, usually reserved, beamed with undisguised pride. Diana squeezed my hand in excitement as the nominations in our category were announced. When our campaign won, the applause thundering through the room, I hugged my team members and took the stage with them to accept the award. Looking out at the audience, I saw my father and Diana on their feet, applauding with genuine joy. Later at the reception, an industry veteran approached me. "That was impressive work, Mitchell. You've got a distinct voice and your campaign's authentic, confident, distinctive. Keep that vision clear." "Thank you," I said, and for perhaps the first time in my life, I fully believed I deserved the praise. Back at the hotel bar, as we celebrated with champagne, Diana raised her glass to Audrey, who had the courage to find her own path. My father nodded, adding quietly, "And to new beginnings." I clinked my glass against theirs, the champagne catching the light like liquid gold. "To authenticity," I said, in work and in life. The journey wasn't complete, the wounds not fully healed, but standing there with these people who were learning to see and value the real me, I knew I had taken the essential first step. I had chosen to value myself. 1 year after the family dinner that changed everything, I found myself back in my parents' Newton home for my brother James's 34th birthday celebration. The invitation had come from James directly, with assurances that it would be a larger gathering with friends as well as family, creating a buffer of social expectations that might make the interaction with my mother more manageable. I arrived deliberately 15 minutes late to avoid any awkward one-on-one time before other guests appeared. The house looked the same: imposing Georgian architecture, immaculate landscaping, interior decorated in the formal traditional style my mother preferred. Yet my perception of it had transformed completely. What once felt like an intimidating fortress now seemed merely a house, expensive and impressive, but no longer holding the power to diminish me. James greeted me with a brief hug. "Thanks for coming. I know it's not easy." "I wouldn't miss your birthday," I replied, handing him a carefully wrapped package containing vintage vinyl records I'd tracked down from his favorite jazz artists. The living room was already filled with guests: James's colleagues, several cousins, my father's brother and his wife, and a few family friends. My father approached immediately, his face lighting up with genuine pleasure. "Audrey, wonderful to see you." His hug was warm, no longer the perfunctory gesture of the past. Diana waved from across the room where she was chatting with a group of guests, and then inevitably I spotted my mother, elegant as always in a tailored blue dress, observing my arrival with an unreadable expression. I made my way to her, conscious of the eyes following our interaction. "Hello, Mother." "Audrey," she nodded, her posture rigid. "Thank you for coming. James was hoping you would." No criticism, no backhanded compliment, just a neutral acknowledgement. In the context of our history, it felt almost revolutionary. Throughout the evening, I navigated the gathering with a new confidence, chatting easily with relatives and friends without the constant anxiety about saying or doing something that would trigger my mother's disapproval. And noticed she watched me from a distance, her expression thoughtful rather than critical. The dynamic between us had shifted fundamentally. Where once there had been a power imbalance, she the judge, I the perpetually inadequate performer, now there was something approaching equality. I was no longer seeking her approval, and she seemed uncertain how to interact with this new version of her daughter. Later, as guests mingled around the dining room table laden with catered appetizers, Diana sidled up to me. "How are you doing with all this?" she asked quietly. "Better than I expected," I admitted. "It's strange being back here, but it doesn't affect me the way it used to." "You seem different," she observed, "more present." "I feel more present," I agreed, "more grounded in who I actually am rather than who I think I should be." Diana smiled. "It suits you." Our conversation was interrupted by James calling for attention to make a toast. As glasses were raised to celebrate his birthday, I caught my mother watching me again. This time, when our eyes met, she didn't look away. Instead, she gave me a small, uncertain nod, not quite warmth, but perhaps acknowledgement. The past year had brought changes for everyone in the family. My mother and I had established a new limited relationship: occasional lunches or coffees in public places, conversations that remained largely superficial but were at least free from her former pattern of criticism and comparison. She had continued with therapy, though she rarely discussed it directly with me. My father had taken early retirement from his law firm and seemed more relaxed, more present than I could ever remember him being. He had begun to develop interests outside of work: photography, travel, volunteering at a legal aid clinic, and in the process, was rediscovering parts of himself long subsumed by his professional identity. Diana and her husband Richard had made significant changes too. They had downsized from their Beacon Hill townhouse to a smaller but still elegant condo, with Diana scaling back her design business to focus more on her renewed interest in painting. The facade of perfection had cracked, revealing a more authentic life beneath. My relationship with Diana had deepened into something I valued tremendously: a friendship between equals rather than the aunt-niece dynamic shaped by my mother's manipulations. We met regularly for brunches or gallery visits, conversations flowing naturally between professional topics and personal growth. "I'm selling the Providence location," she confided during one such meeting. "It was never really about business expansion, it was about competing with your success, proving I was still achieving more." "How twisted is that?" "Family dynamics are rarely rational," I replied, understanding completely. As for me, the year had brought continued professional success. My team had expanded, and I'd been approached about potential leadership roles at other agencies. though I wasn't ready to leave the supportive environment I'd helped create. More importantly, I'd found balance developing friendships, dating occasionally though not yet finding anyone I connected with deeply, and exploring interests outside of work like ceramics classes and hiking. Most significantly, I had finally internalized the critical lesson that my worth wasn't determined by my mother's assessment of me or anyone else's. Through therapy and self-reflection, I'd begun to recognize and value my own strengths, to accept my imperfections without shame, and to trust my perceptions rather than doubting them when they conflicted with others' narratives. As James's birthday celebration wound down, I found myself alone in the kitchen with my mother. She was arranging leftover food into containers with her characteristic precision, and I had come in to deposit my empty glass. The moment of privacy felt both awkward and significant. The party went well, I offered neutrally. James seemed happy. Yes, she agreed, not looking up from her task. After a moment she added, "Your father tells me your work has been recognized again." "We won the Markham account last month," I said, surprised she knew about it. "It's a major client." She nodded, sealing a container of fruit salad. "He follows your career quite closely now, keeps articles about your campaigns." The revelation that my father collected news of my professional achievements touched me deeply. My mother hesitated, then said in a voice so low I almost missed it, "I should have done that." It wasn't an explicit apology, but coming from Margaret Mitchell, it was unprecedented acknowledgement of failure. I didn't know how to respond, so I simply said, "Thank you for telling me that." She gave a sharp nod and returned to her task. I understood then that this might be all she was capable of, small moments of recognition, tiny acknowledgements of harm done. There would likely never be a grand reconciliation scene with tears and embraces and explicit apologies. That wasn't who she was, perhaps wasn't who she could be. And I realized, with a sense of peace that had been years in the making, that it was enough. Not ideal, not what I might have wished for in my deepest heart, but enough to move forward with. I could accept these small offerings for what they were while maintaining the boundaries that protected my hard-won self-worth. As I prepared to leave, collecting my coat from the foyer closet, my father approached. "I'll walk you out." In the driveway, the April evening mild and fragrant with early blooms, he hugged me again. "I'm so proud of you, Audrey, not just for your professional success, though that's remarkable. I'm proud of the person you've become, strong, compassionate, authentic." "Thank you, Dad," I said, blinking back unexpected tears. "That means a lot." "The unthinkable thing you did a year ago," he said thoughtfully, "standing up for yourself, setting boundaries, it changed all of us, made us look at patterns we'd been blindly following for decades." "It wasn't easy," I admitted. "Sometimes I still wonder if I could have found a less dramatic way." "Sometimes a clean break is the only way to heal properly," he said, echoing Dr. Lowenstein's words from months earlier. "Like a bone that's been setting wrong, it needs to be broken again to heal straight." Driving back to my apartment, I reflected on all that had transpired since that fateful dinner. The journey hadn't been linear. There had been setbacks, moments of doubt, times when the old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But the overall trajectory had been toward healing, toward authenticity, toward a life defined by my own values rather than my mother's distorted expectations. The unthinkable act, standing up to my mother after 29 years of seeking her approval, had indeed been the breaking point, but it had also been the beginning of something new, a life where I was the author of my own story rather than a supporting character in someone else's. In the quiet of my apartment, surrounded by objects I had chosen because they brought me joy rather than because they would impress others, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, not for the years of emotional abuse that could never be reframed as a positive, but for the strength I had found to break free of it, and for the authenticity I was discovering on the other side. The lessons of the past year had transformed me. I had learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential for healthy relationships. I had discovered that understanding the source of someone's harmful behavior doesn't obligate you to continue accepting. I had realized that family patterns can be recognized and changed, even after decades of repetition. Most importantly, I had come to believe in my own worth not as something to be earned through achievement or approval, but as an inherent quality that had been there all along, waiting to be recognized. Have you ever had to do something unthinkable to protect your mental health and well-being? What boundaries have you set with family members that changed your relationship dynamics? Please share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the most difficult decisions led to the greatest healing.